Regent, the February 20th, 2025 public meeting of the Conservation Commission will be conducted in a remote format consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which extended remote participation in public meetings until March 31st of 2025. I'm putting a link in the chat now to all the meeting materials. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and recording may be made publicly available. Also, please note that the Zoom chat feature may be used for requests and comments that contribute to the Commission's procedures, and if it's used otherwise, it may be disabled at the Chair or tonight Vice Chair's discretion. A public comment period will follow for each hearing. The Commission encourages attendees to ask questions and offer comments during the public comment period. And usually we have our Commission Chair facilitate tonight's meeting. That's Chuck Tirone, but he is not in attendance. So we have our Vice Chair, Susan Chapnick. Each vote taken tonight will be conducted with a roll call vote, and we start with agenda review and attendance. So to you, Susan, to do that.
Thank you, David. And I'll just remind everybody that's on the call, if you could please mute yourself when you're not speaking, so we don't have extraneous background noise. And I'm going to take attendance and then I'll review the agenda for tonight's meeting. Commissioner David White.
Yes.
Commissioner Dave Kaplan.
Present.
Commissioner Brian McBride.
Present.
Commissioner Mike Gildiskane.
Present.
Associate Commissioner Sarah Alfaro Franco.
Present.
And Associate Commissioner Eileen Coleman. Eileen, I see you there, but you're on mute, so I'm going to count you here. Okay, thanks. Absent, as David Morgan said, is Chuck Tirone, Chair, and Nathaniel Stevens, Commissioner, is also absent this evening. And we have with us Agent David Morgan and Administrator Jackie Anderson. And I'm going to review the agenda for tonight's meeting, which is on the link that David put in the chat. We're going to review meeting minutes from February. We're going to have several discussion items, including the Mystic to Minuteman Bikeway working session. That's going to be a presentation. Updates from several of our groups and liaisons. And then we have 2 hearings for this evening. I'm going to flip them. I'm going to hear the RDA, the request for determination of applicability for 69 Henderson Street first. And then we're going to follow with the notice of intent for 995 Mass Ave. So I'm going to start with the administrative section, which is reviewing meeting minutes for February 6, 2025. Thank you, Jackie, for drafting the minutes. And I did have comments to these. David, did you have those up? Great.
Yeah, so I just took the liberty of adding Jackie to our attendance list because
that sounds good.
Official, and this was her
Yeah.
first meeting. So
Yep.
Let's see. Yes, we talked about a couple of certificates of compliance, enforcement order, some light edits to that section, and the usual updates, same thing. This is where we went Thorndike Place. And there are a few clarifications that Susan offered in here. Do you want to offer anything, any content?
Yeah, I was just clarifying what was said based on my notes from GZA and BSC on the mounding analysis and the stormwater discussion, which was very complex anyway. So good thing we have the recording. And then just called out the public comment section to make sure everybody knows those are public comments in this section.
Good, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Pretty light touch for the remainder here.
Whoops, we lost it. There we go. So, does any other commissioner or associate commissioner have any comments on the minutes? And if not, would a commissioner like to make a motion to approve the minutes as edited?
So moved.
That was,
Second.
okay, so that was Mike. Oh, Mike was second. Who was first?
Mike was first, Brian second.
Mike was first, Brian second. Thank you.
Mhm.
Mike and Brian, and I'll take a roll call vote. Dave Kaplan,
Yes.
David White,
Yes.
Brian McBride,
Yes.
Mike Gilderscane,
Yes.
and Susan Chapnick says yes. So the minutes are approved as edited. Great. Now we're going to go on. Are there any other administrative issues, David? I didn't think there were. David
No.
Morgan.
No, we're good to go on.
We're good to go on. Great. So the Mystic to Minuteman Bikeway Working Session is going to be a presentation. This is a project that is crosses many different departments, DCR, the town of Arlington, Planning Department, and the Mystic River Watershed Association. And who do we have here that's going to present this for us? Or are you all presenting? Amber,
Yeah.
I don't know who's presenting.
I'll kick us off.
Okay, and
My
if you
name's
could
Am-
introduce yourselves, each one who's presenting, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen and then
Great.
there's a slide where we'll talk who's going to be here. Sorry.
Okay,
The child down here. Okay.
you should be able
So-
to share your screen.
Yep.
Okay,
Let's see here.
and I'll
Mhm.
just say as just a form of process, we'll hear your presentation and then we'll do questions from the commission. And since we probably have time tonight, if there are any members of the public that want to ask questions, I'll use my discretion to allow that, if that's okay with you.
Is everyone seeing my screen okay?
Yes.
All right. So we're here tonight to talk about a piece of the Mystic to Minuteman Bikeway. I tend to use Greenway as the term for all modes along these paths, but I'm going to go to the next slide. And this is where we have our team here tonight. First, myself, I'm on the Trails and Greenways team at DCR. I work statewide, but do quite a bit of work along the Mystic. And I have Carl Alexander here. Do you want to introduce yourself, Carl?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Carl Alexander, I'm Senior Manager for Greenways at the Mystic River Watershed Association.
Okay. And then I have our consultant, Stan Tech, Elise.
Hi, everyone. Elise D'Onofrio with Stantec. I'm a project manager and I'll say a trails specialist as I do lots of bike paths and trails across the state.
Great. And then I've been partnering with John and David. And David is the one that allowed us or got us the in tonight to talk to you. So I appreciate everyone's time for a more informal working session. And then John.
Hi everyone, I'm John Alessi. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner for the town and a colleague of David's. And we actually share a wall, so very familiar with all the Concom work and looking forward to our discussion tonight.
Great. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes setting the stage for how this project came to be, what are the goals, and then we'll get into the specifics of the design as it relates to the Wetland Protection Act. So this is a shot of the existing path along the Mystic between the Mystic River and Mystic Valley Parkway. Just as a bigger framing, DCR and other partners are working to advance a statewide network of greenways for active transportation and recreation. This is one of those such networks, and we really are trying to make a facility that is for all ages and all abilities. So that's kind of the bigger picture goal. And if we get into the feasibility study, some of you might be familiar with this. This is when Daniel Amstutz was at the town of Arlington, and he led this. It was funded by a Mass Trails grant. And at the time, I was at the Mystic River Watershed Association, so I was very involved with this project. And We had quite robust community engagement through the 3 public meetings. And I don't know if there's anything, Carl, you want to add related to the Mystic River and where you guys are with that today, and maybe John, just with, I think you're advancing another stretch of that. So this was the roadmap that is taking us on where we are today.
Yeah, I can briefly just touch on the importance of this work, the initial study that Amber and the town of Arlington helped to facilitate. As we all know, the shore lying along the Mystic River and the Mystic Lakes in this area, as well as the parkways, are a really critical resource not only for local ecology, but also recreational use for so many neighbors and visitors from throughout the region. So we've just heard from so many residents about the need for revitalization of both banks of the Mystic, along the Mystic Lakes. And so it's just an amazing opportunity for us on one hand to support local ecology, stormwater management, landscape improvements, but also bring improved accessibility and recreations, again, as Amber noted, for all ages and abilities. So I think that's the main value that we're excited to really promote through this process.
Yeah, and John, maybe I should wait till we're at the diagram that shows the pieces here. You can talk through the ones that are not in the box are a piece of that first feasibility study. And then what we're talking about tonight is in the blue box. So just to frame it out.
To talk now or later?
I think just high level, like we've broken them up into 2 separate pieces, I think is the goal. We don't maybe need to say more than that, but.
Yeah, so I can just give a brief update. So within my work with the town, I'm managing what we see outside of this blue box that Amber's put together. So it's segment A and B. So this is both town-owned property and DCR-owned property. So the town, after completing the feasibility study that you just saw on the previous slide, was able to apply and receive a $1 million earmark from Congresswoman Catherine Clark's office. So right now, the town is currently in the process of getting under contract with the, both the state and the federal government to access that funding. And we actually went through a competitive procurement process to get a consultant to oversee the design work for segment A and B. It just happens to be Elise from Stantec here, who will be also designing these 2 other segments of the project. So we're hoping to kind of, get that work started in the spring or summer, but so this is how like all these 2 pieces fit together.
Yep. Thanks, John. And then we selected the segment from where Alewife Brook Parkway comes out near the confluence of the Alewife Brook and Mystic River up to High Street, mostly because this work could be done completely out of the road right of way. For the other sections, to put in a path, you have to change the road cross section, and that is just more complicated, involves more departments within DCR, and has a higher cost. So we thought we could do this section pretty nimbly because it's all within the parkland that DCR owns. In fact, half of the stretch already has a gravel path and the rest of it is a desire line path. So that's why we're starting with this section. So this is a proposed cross section. What's most relevant is the cross section up here. We're proposing a 11-foot, the unusual odd number. It's always like 10 or 12, but asphalt shared use path with 2 feet soft shoulders on each side. As I alluded to with the feasibility study, there was quite robust debate about how wide and which kind of surface. And the result of that was that there was a common understanding that having the most durable surface of asphalt is the best idea from a climate resiliency standpoint, maintenance standpoint. And then some people felt very, very strongly about not having a path that's too wide, but we don't want to make a path that's too narrow for the anticipated volumes. So that's how we landed with that cross section over here in the left. In a separate effort, I'm working with our parkways team at DCR to stripe bike lanes along the road to hopefully slow down cars by narrowing the travel lanes and allowing a space for bikers that are faster, maybe e-bikes, because that's a growing concern about mixing all the modes within the parkland paths. And then we'll go right into the preliminary design, and we've highlighted all of the resource areas, and at the end we'll have a summary of all the potential impacts and a couple of questions that we have. So if you're okay with me driving, Elise, I'll go to the next
Yeah,
slide.
go for it. Yep.
All right.
So we have two sets of the plans, and again, we're past, I'll say, conceptual design. I consider, or we consider what was done as part of the feasibility study, the conceptual design, and now we're trying to take it a step further. So we're in preliminary where we've laid out in alignment horizontally, looked at what we can actually achieve by getting survey and wetland flagging and looking where our resource areas are. So this is still very early in the design phase, and we would love to get any comments or thoughts, tonight, so we can incorporate that as we move forward, just to be more efficient in our design. But what we did was, we looked at, okay, we're going to have one stretch that is likely going to be mainly just the 11-foot wide paved path, as Amber was describing. And then there are other areas where there are these desire lines that go to street crossings. So in the set of plans that I'll go through right now, the grayish color represents that hot mix asphalt paved path. The brown is the stabilized aggregate path or gravel path. Those are those desire lines that go to some of these cross streets that come into the picture. And then we have a few seating areas, trailhead areas, areas that you could put signage, just some kind of preliminary thoughts on that, but we haven't really gotten into that yet. We really want to try and nail down the paths first and then work through where the best places are for some of these other areas. So this is starting at the end where Medford Street is. And one of the reasons for, one of the thoughts is we already looked at can we just make one path through here, or can we just make two paths through here? Have a paved one and a gravel one. And it really doesn't fit everywhere, and it doesn't make sense everywhere, because you assume that people are likely going to be using one or the other, unless we get into these areas where we have these cross streets. And if we don't put a gravel path in those areas, our fear is that people are going to make their own, and they're going to create the desire lines that are there today. So you'll see that there's a few areas that we've kept these paths in there as we go through the plans.
Yeah, I'll just point out that this cross section at the bottom left is what she's alluding to, that's not as relevant, because there's not that many stretches of parkland that are so generous to allow two separate facilities. We have twice the impact, twice the maintenance, but we'll go through stabilizer path. You can see one's right here.
Yeah, so going up to Medford Street there, and I would say where we're connecting on this end is still a little bit up in the air. Amber's been working with the Parkways folks and trying to discuss, what can be done in the near term as part of this project as far as pavement markings. But as part of the larger segments A and B, I think we're going to be looking at this as a larger network and see what we want to do in this area and how we want to connect. But if you want to go to the next sheet,
yeah,
we get
one thing,
into,
Elise, maybe we could just call out the colored lines of
yes,
delineated
those might be
resources.
clear on the next one. I do. So on these, the first set of graphics, we have the wetland lines are in blue, and then we have each of the buffer lines. On the next set that we go through the plans, I have all the colored lines laid out and labeled, and it might be easier to see on that. I kind of wanted to use the first set just to talk through why we're choosing to do the stabilizer. It was becoming too cumbersome and too many colors to have everything shown on one set, so I tried to split it off a little bit.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So this next page is, heading through the parkland. We noticed there was a little bit of a desire line through here, people wanting to get up to Mystic Valley Parkway. There's also a neighborhood across the street on the other side, and it looks like that is a common place for people to go. So we wanted to make that a more formal connection, assuming that people coming out of those neighborhoods might want to cross there and get onto the path system. This area was a little too narrow, and the terrain as you get a little closer to Mystic Valley Parkway was a little bit, I'll say it was almost like a slight hill and embankment. So in order to avoid removing trees and really doing a huge grading exercise here, we decided to just keep one path through this whole stretch and maximize it with, assuming that 11-foot wide path through here.
And this path that's like gridded right here in the light gray is showing the existing path right now. So
Yeah, and so that's another great point, Amber, because anywhere that we could, we tried to pull the path away from the river. There are some areas where it's very close, and in order to just pull away from that embankment, not have as much impact in that immediate 25-foot buffer zone, the idea was to pull it away and try and decrease that.
I just had a quick question
Yep.
just to orient
Sure.
myself. What
Yeah.
are those two cross streets, I guess, at the bottom of the page?
I was just trying to like rack my brain on what those were. I was like, what are those cross streets? Do you know, John, or anyone else that's familiar? I could look it up.
I think this is where the Mystic Riverfront Restoration Area is.
It's not
I
quite
can-
there. You'll see it.
Yeah, that'll
Oh,
be on
okay.
another sheet.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's down a little further because
It
it does have a cross section where people cross Mystic
I
Valley
think it's
Parkway.
Webster. Is it Webster?
Is it Webster and Palmer? I'm
Yeah,
playing the home version of the game and trying
Yeah.
to follow along.
yeah. I think
think
it's
it's Palmer.
Webster and Palmer's over here.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's Webster and Palmer from
Yeah.
Carl Alexander said. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I think we have just a couple more to get to the end, and then we'll go through the
Yeah.
resource delineation.
Thank
So
you.
here's the restoration area.
Yeah. So this was an area we wanted to look at, partially if we're going to widen out the path here, assume bikes are going to be on it. It's a little tight. The curves through here to get around the restoration projects, the project area is just really snug, and it creates this blind corners for people. So we wanted to try and smooth it out in here, maybe move some of this planting around, keep it in the area, but just arrange it in a way that we could have a little bit of a flatter alignment going through here.
Yep. So right now it kind of goes like this, and this is straightening it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so here I think is where we're starting to get towards River Street.
River. Yeah.
Yep. So this was another area, we're keeping the 11-foot wide path through here, but then noticing that there is a desire line that heads towards River Street to cross the river and get over to the other side of the river. We wanted to consider keeping that gravel path there, assuming people that are going in that direction will go that way. They're not going to come up to the sidewalk, on Mystic Valley Parkway and then walk along that to get over the bridge. So next slide, this gets you to the other side of River Street. Similar thing on the opposite side is there's a desire line. So people that are going to be along the path in this area, they're going to head towards, the bridge in the most direct way. So the thought was to try and keep that gravel path at that location.
And this came up in the feasibility study around not making the main path kind of not be at the intersection and more of a mid-block crossing. We didn't want to encourage that, so it's moved down to the intersection. Some people might jump between the two stabilizer paths, but it won't be the main travel direction, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So next slide, this is that last stretch through there. Again, it's another kind of pinch point area that it would have been more impacts to try and keep that stabilized gravel path adjacent to the paved area the entire way. So again, we've come down to one 11-foot wide paved path. And then as we get closer to the end here where we are meeting up with the crossing at Alewife Brook Parkway, there's a lot of parkland here and there's not a ton of trees in this area. So it might be a good idea to create, great area for maybe some seating, do that stabilized aggregate path, maybe some signage, any of that type of stuff I think would be great at this location. And one of the things we notice is this whole area up near the crossing of Alewife Brook, because the existing path comes up just to the left of that crossing as shown in this graphic. That whole area is kind of dirt because people just cut right up through there. So the idea would be for us to align it more with the crossing so people would hopefully stay on the path getting to the crossing and just continue across and hopefully keep that grassed area more grass would be the goal.
Yeah. Another element from the feasibility study was identifying overlook and seating areas, kind of referencing where people are going to the river now for views. So that's, why we came up with having that seating area there.
Yeah. So the
Okay.
next set of plans, this is ultimately the same set, but I tried to highlight something different in this. And this kind of gives us just an overview of where we are impacting. So the resource areas that we focused on at this point, and we have shown in all these different colors, and I'm happy to share, I think we're happy to share the plans with anybody if they want to look at these. It's very hard to always zero in on stuff on a screen when you're making a presentation. So happy to share the preliminary drawings if that helps. But we're showing the 200-foot riverfront area, 100-foot wetland buffer, 50-foot wetland buffer, 25-foot wetland buffer. Our wetland line is in the bright blue along the bank. And then we also have bordering land subject to flooding at elevation 7, which that's another aspect of what we are working through once we get the alignment set, is how will we compensate for any impacts to the floodplain in this area and where those impacts occur. So we quantified what we have at this point, and this was already after us going through this process a couple times of looking at where is the alignment, how is it laid out, which buffer areas are we impacting, and we have it just summarized very, I'm going to say generally at this point, just to get an idea of where we are at. So the area on the right here, I tried to highlight different spots because I wanted to focus on different things to kind of explain why we made the choices that we made and why these impacts are occurring. But so this area on the left closest to Medford Street, that gravel path, the gravel path in that area today is in the same exact spot that we are putting it. So we would want to reconstruct the gravel path that's there today. So that would be an impact to that 25-foot buffer zone. And in that zone, that's probably the most sensitive of all of these. But there is an existing path there today. And so our hope would be not to make that any more so than what it is today. Getting into this next stretch within the green box area, this is an area where there's only, I'm going to say a 7 to 8 or 9 foot path through this area, maybe even less in spots. It's very inconsistent. And through that area, we would like to put in an 11-foot wide paved path. And so everything that's shaded in that light blue color, that's everything that's impacting within that 25-foot wetland buffer. So I just wanted to highlight that, assuming and kind of knowing that that is one of the more sensitive areas that we're going to be impacting. And this is one of the reasons, if you want to go to the next sheet, Amber, this is one of the reasons that we tried to start pulling the path away, is so if we could get the path out of that 25-foot buffer. So on the left here, the green box, it's a continuation of the previous sheet. And then getting into this area, you can see that light blue line ends up now on like the top side of the path. So we've been able to pull the path back out of that 25-foot buffer and get it between the 25 and 50-foot buffer. We're still making an impact in a buffer zone, but we're at least able to pull it away from the river some and not have folks so close to the river. And it's an opportunity to really restore some of the vegetation through there and be specific about what points we want people to maybe have that access.
I will note too, this existing conditions gravel path is really a spectrum of how you define a gravel path, because further down by Alewife, it feels more like a real gravel path. And here it's almost like compacted earth. Maybe there was some gravel, or just to acknowledge that it's a little different, but either way, it's very compacted, if not actually fully gravel. So just to point that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So next slide, again, this kind of highlights, and again, I took out the shading from the previous plan set just because it was becoming way too much and difficult to look at and explain. But you can see that there's the gravel path is would be closer to the existing path, is closer to the wetland line. Thank you, Amber. And we tried to pull the path out of that as much as we could. So the only area in there that we're really impacting is some of the grading, the shoulder, and it's likely to be a grassed area through there. So that was kind of our main goal, was anywhere that we can pull it out of the 25-foot wetland buffer without like impacting, trees and having to really overhaul the land. That was kind of the approach that we took through here.
Yeah,
so
that's another thing, is we're assuming not to disturb any mature trees, because there's quite a few in here. We know that's a really critical part of this parkland.
Yeah, and so this same thing, we pulled the path here completely back out. Some of this area is even pulling it even further out. And then again, as we approach River Street on the right, we have that gravel path that we're maintaining through that stretch there to get up to the River Street Bridge to go over the river. And that is an impact there, but the path exists there today. Similarly, on this other side, again, we're still in preliminary design, so we haven't really gone through some of these slope limits with a fine tooth comb, but this is an area that I see that we can likely get rid of that impact in there, pull those slope limits in, and just really get into the weeds of the design as we take it to the next step.
I had a quick question on that last.
Yeah, sure, Mike.
Plate. The aggregate path seems to stop at River Street and continue on the other side. Is there no connection direct?
It connects to the sidewalk on the bridge of River
Right
Street that
here,
goes
there's a
over.
sidewalk.
Our survey limits only go so far, so it doesn't really, you can't really see it in there, but there's a sidewalk there that it's connecting to the back of that sidewalk.
So people will have to sort of get off their bikes and walk across, is that it?
Well, that's what I was
go ahead,
alluding
Amber.
to earlier, is that the main path is going to direct most of the traffic here to this
Got it.
crossing, rather than, it almost looks like people might cross mid-block there. But this is really designed for the Desire line that's connecting to the sidewalk that's going across the bridge,
Got it.
if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, it kind of depends on where people are going. We were out there doing several site walks. I mean, we saw people just walking straight up there and, walking over the bridge. And there might be that person or some people with bikes and, however they choose to do that. But the main line is essentially along Mystic Valley Parkway.
And there is no curb cut here either.
Yes, correct.
So, yeah. Next slide, or?
So yep.
Yeah, okay.
Continuing on. Again, we tried, this is a section that actually the gravel path, we've essentially kept the limit of that existing path today, the side closest to the river, and just tried to populate it on the opposite side closer to the road. This is where it starts getting into that section of, like Amber was referencing, how the gravel looks a little more put together here and it's a little wider. So essentially we're just trying to pave what is a gravel path today in this stretch, and we'd be making it a little wider because I think it's probably only about 9 or 10 feet now, and we're looking to do an 11-foot width. So then as we get to the crossing here, I mean, both of these, both the gravel path and the paved path, we're able to keep that out of that 25-foot wetland buffer zone. And then I would say this area is probably the only area that we are adding something, and it's because we're doing the dual path through here. So where we, there is essentially a 10-foot wide gravel path through here, we'd be putting an 11-foot wide paved path and then, a 6-foot wide gravel path.
And then one of the questions that we do want to discuss tonight, that the next slide or two will lead us to this, is there's an existing sidewalk right now that starts here and goes all the way to River Street, but it doesn't go past River. And I believe that there's 9 light poles that create an obstruction. So it's not even, I think it's 6 feet. So even less than that clear when you have those obstructions. So we talked about it amongst ourselves, John, Carl, David, and I, about, should we take out that sidewalk if we're putting in a new facility along here? We also want to discuss that in the context of permitting. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a picture of that on the next slide,
Yep.
Amber,
So
if you want to. Yeah. So this is a picture of that sidewalk, just one part of it, but it goes essentially, like Amber said, from that crossing to Alewife Brook Greenway to River Street. And we just did some quick calcs to see, okay, if we wanted to remove that and replace it with, say, grass, make it a pervious surface, because trying to offset some of the impact of us adding a paved surface in the parkland, we'd be looking at reducing the impervious of what we're adding by about 9,400 square feet. So I didn't break it down. I was saying to Amber, we didn't break down the numbers super specifically and get into the weeds, which we will when we get to the point of permitting for this, but just wanted to give everyone kind of a general idea now of, what is our impervious area? How much are we adding? And, is this a way to offset that some by, reducing impacts and removing this? We're not sure how many people actually use this sidewalk. It seems like maybe if there's a paved area through the park, people might be more likely to walk through there. So
Right.
I think this is the end of our presentation pretty much, and then I think we'll take any feedback, thoughts, questions that
Is this the
anyone
last
wants.
slide? Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we could stay on this slide maybe.
Thank you. I'm going to go to commissioners. If there are commissioners that have questions, I know I have a few, but anybody else? Dave Kaplan?
Yeah, as far as getting rid of that existing sidewalk at the street level, I think that's there's a good opportunity there if you have alternative means of transportation, and like you said, could be a good offset, or maybe an opportunity for a pollinator pathway and not even grass or something like that. And also just wanted to comment too, it looked like a decent amount of that stabilizer path is below the base flood elevation. Can you speak, I guess, to the resiliency of that path and
Yeah.
how it will last, through any kind of flooding events, or um, just
Yeah, that's a
maybe.
great question. And that was part of the debate around having the primary path system not be asphalt. We just felt like it wasn't reliable enough to withstand more intense precipitation events and such. I wasn't quite thinking about flooding, but we've had success with them, these types of paths, when it's very flat, which it is. So I think that's good, but it is probably like somewhat more susceptible to issues with flooding, and we'd have to do more maintenance. You can get into a lot of details on what type of spec you're dealing with for the stabilizer, or is it a 3/8 minus and all these different things, but it's something that we should consider. And I don't know, Lise, if you've had what your experience is.
Yeah, we've been talking about this on a lot of projects because the concern is becoming more and more apparent. And so many of these paths are along, I'll say a water feature of some sort where this is a concern. I think, one of the things that we can do is look at, like Amber said, what do we want to use as this part of this surface? There are different additives you can add into the gravel to stabilize it a little more and make it a little more just robust and won't break down so easy with water, flooding it. I don't know. I don't have offhand, statistics of that, but I think we've been researching that in general for a lot of our projects about what are our options other than pavement and can any of these withstand. So I think it's something we're going to continue to pursue.
Yeah. We actually have a great test case around the corner, which is the Alewife stormwater wetland, which we recently resurfaced after, I think it was 12 years, and particularly one part of that stabilizer path, if you guys have been around it, where there's like boardwalks and things into that wetland, is part of it is actually in a designed spillway. So there were a lot of flood events going over the stabilizer path, and that was the organic lock, Elise.
Yeah, yeah.
And it
Okay.
mostly withstood. Now, it did wash out more than the other ones. So when we went to refresh it, we just did it this past fall, we had to put more material back there. But that means it had kind of accreted into the stormwater wetland too.
Oh, thank you for that. And just one quick follow-up question or
Yeah.
additional question. What's your plan for winter maintenance of the pathways?
As far as like plowing or
Plowing,
salting,
salting, sanding, the whole shebang.
yeah, so this would likely be plowed. It is a new facility, but I actually think it is plowed right now. Carl or someone else, could you guys? I know that DCR is plowing some of our non-paved paths in this area already. And this is the main system here. It's not on the other side of the river, so.
Yeah,
As
but
far as,
just curious
yeah.
because if this roadside sidewalk ends up going away, I think a lot of people are still going to be reliant on it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very integrated into our system. It's not like a new facility, a field from where that's already happening. So I have some confidence. I could also look up on the GIS map about where we plow.
Okay.
Already, we might be doing it. And then I don't know, I think right now we're in our ops team is in a interesting place between pressures from like EPA and things not to salt, and then pressure to salt for safety. So I don't think they do a lot, if any, but that's, I know it's
Alright, well,
happening a little more.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you, Will.
we do have standard conditions on types of salt that's acceptable within jurisdictional areas, so that might be something we'd have to work out with DCR. But
Yeah.
let me bring David Morgan in because I think he wanted to talk more about the flooding issue.
Yeah.
And then I'll go to Brian, I think he was.
The first on the salt question, maybe this is a question for Carl. Is the Mystic under TMDL for chloride impairment, or is it just Alewife I'm thinking of?
Fortunately, that's not my purview. I'm not sure. Sorry.
Okay. I should know, so fair enough. I'm gonna share my screen really quick.
Oh yeah, here I'll stop.
And show the flood hazard areas from the new FEMA maps. They're considerably reduced in extent, but the difficulty with this location is the floodway, which is the orange in this picture. And I think everybody present knows what the floodway is, but that's moving water, right? So you can see the left side of my screen here is the old map. The right-hand side is the new map. It's a little bit reduced, as you see, like the 100-year at the edge of the cemetery there is scaling back. It's way scaled back in other areas downstream, but largely, the floodway is pretty consistent. It's like slightly narrowed in some places, but that was my concern when I talked with the team initially about the stone dust path. And so it's really interesting to hear about the spillway at the Alewife stormwater wetlands and that being fairly stable for over a decade, because I thought for sure stone dust just washed right away, but it seems like that might be a engineering solution. Just wanted to offer additional context with the maps.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So this project is a little new to me. I would have thought I would have caught this on the Open Space Committee, so I'm trying to digest the intent here. So we have this park along the Riverway, which is kind of multi-purpose use now. And it seems like the proposal is to build a fair amount of, hard surface, perhaps high volume transportation features into this park, as opposed to what Brian might like, which might be habitat restoration and enhancement of the natural features. So I'm feeling a little objection to the whole project. I think, Susan, this is beyond the scope of our work here, but I just want to maybe get your feedback to this concern that the direction may not be a pro-habitat direction, but maybe a pro-transportation direction. And that may color the way some of us feel about having passed close to the waterway. And is there an alternative, for example, that would protect the habitat more, that would put the bikes, especially the high volume fast bikes, which we see everywhere now, right? Which are a great thing, but are perhaps a different direction than a quiet habitat restored park, right? So I'm just wondering how you thought about the balance in that direction, which is causing me at least a little concern.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and Carl, I think you guys have the feasibility study posted pretty prominently on your website. Maybe you could post the link to that project page, because you can see all the notes and all the summary of the community feedback. And in some ways, we had really robust chats going on Zoom, and the community was basically having that conversation through the public meeting around how do you balance these different goals and interests and needs. And I would say the thing that rose to the top is that Myra has been stewarding a vision of connecting the Boston Lakes, or the Mystic Lakes, to Boston Harbor with one contiguous system that in some places is more recreation, in some places is more transportation, depending on where you are. And in this stretch, there really is no facility that connects you up to the lakes. And as I alluded to on the other side of the Mystic here, there's almost really no path. So if we were only going to be really picking one side to be the main stem, this is the one that makes sense, that has a facility like almost there right now. And like I said, standards these days, if MassDOT was involved, it would be a 14-foot wide path. And that was a really intentional decision to scale it down and to leave soft surface edges so people could walk on a more natural surface, and trying to find that balance between people that want to go for a bike ride with their kids. And as I alluded to or showed that section of Mystic Valley Parkway, that's the intention for putting bike lanes on that road, is for the high speed bikers. To try to separate speeds a little bit, but
yep. I know I'm jumping into a public forum kind of conversation here, but just one last question, Susan, and I'll stop. Which is, you couldn't just put the bikes on the wide Mystic River Parkway there and protect the habitat along the river? Is that unfeasible for some reason? It seems like a fairly wide street there, right?
Yeah, I can go back to the cross section. It is wide. Let me see here. I'll just go to this so we can see the dimensions. We actually, in the feasibility study, we went through that idea. It's like, do you have all the facilities just up on the road? And I think the sentiment was that too many people want to actually access the parkland and the waterway. And I don't know, while I pull that up, Carl, maybe you could share thoughts, because I know you're in the middle of.
Tell me, Susan, if you want me to take this offline or something. I feel like I'm diverting the
No,
focus
I
here.
think it's a good point. I have reservations myself about putting asphalt within the 25-foot of the river. I know that there's a gravel path, and it's, the Mystic River Restoration Project was kind of my baby, so I know that area really well. I am concerned about improving it rather than adding asphalt. There are additional broken outfalls along that stretch. Some of them are Arlington's outfalls. Some of them were DCRs that were fixed. There are still broken outfalls that are Arlington's. There's an opportunity maybe to improve the water that's getting into to the river, improving water quality by fixing those outfalls. Maybe there's an opportunity there to offset some of the impacts of this project as well. But I am concerned about asphalt closer than the paths are now to the river.
So just for reference, this is the proposed cross section of the road. You have to do some mental math to get back to the cross section today, but it's basically like 2 travel lanes with a fog line. There isn't really any other facilities, so we were proposing to narrow this down to 11 and have these edges. And I think that's what we did look at during the feasibility studies. You add up 12 plus 4, that's 20. So could you have that up on the road? And I think it was just public sentiment was strong about access to the river, and people like to recreate there. And part of it, there's parts of the section where you're more connected to the river, and there's parts where it's quite a bit higher as you get up towards High Street, Route 60. So it has a different feel in those 2 locations.
Right, because there's also a very steep slope in some of these areas from Mystic Valley Parkway down to the river. I mean, it's pretty steep.
This is the steep area. It's a little bit flatter down here. And I'm calling on people, but maybe Susan, you want to be the mediator.
No, well, I'm seeing that there's David Morgan and John who both want to speak, and I think John had his hand up first. So go ahead, John.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Yeah, I can just kind of provide some context from more of a transportation perspective. So, I wasn't around when the feasibility study was being developed, but I think the question about, where bicycles should be is a fair question. I'll just note that from a, the on-road bicycle facilities are definitely for somebody who is, of a greater ability level and a confident level. The purpose of having a bicycle facility not on road is to make it accessible and comfortable for all ages and abilities. So that's why, we're allowing people to have the option to have the bicycle facility on road if the choice is to go at faster speeds, kind of like in line with vehicles, but we're also providing that facility that provides more recreational opportunities for, say, somebody with, a parent with a young child that just wants to kind of go at a slow speed away from traffic. That's an option. And I forget the other point I was going to make, but I just kind of wanted to provide a little bit of that context from a, transportation recreation perspective.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. And maybe
okay.
if I can quickly add, and maybe even not just keep like families biking, but also like I have a 16-month-old son, and so if we're like strolling or walking in groups, people in wheelchairs to paved asphalt, that especially after a quick summer thunderstorm, makes it more comfortable to use small wheel devices. So just wanted to note that as well, in terms of that the age-old trade-off on a aggregate or stone dust versus asphalt.
Thank you.
If I may, Susan, that was just
Yeah.
going to be my second point, just kind of like stating how kind of a more pavement surface does make the more natural space a little bit more accessible to everybody, especially if somebody's using a, assisted mobility device. Having a stone aggregate surface doesn't make it accessible. So a purpose of this project is to kind of, make it accessible to all with a material like that.
Thank you. David Morgan?
You all know that I usually echo Brian's habitat concerns. And I think in this context, it's important to note and remember that the use is already there, and we could be having a restoration conversation. We have done along this stretch in the past, but it being an access path already, I think we will be improving circumstances with a project like this because of the mitigation, because of the way that we are directing traffic to particular locations rather than having just like, the random social path that tramples some of DCR's former mitigation plantings and so forth. There are reasons for maintaining the use, and I think one of them is that the project will ultimately be an improvement in habitat terms. Yeah, I'll stop there. See, other hands are going up.
Thank you, David. David White?
Generally like the idea. I just noticed though that if it's going to be plowed in the winter, asphalt is probably a better choice for the surface.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. Dave Kaplan?
So yeah, I'm hearing a lot about, opportunities for restoration too, and I heard the presenters at the beginning allude to a planting plan that we haven't seen yet. So I don't want to. I assume there's something coming, but I'm not sure if that was supposed to be, or we were planning on discussing that tonight. But I'd be interested in it when it comes out.
Yeah, I think that our intention is to do very strategic plantings. We're also trying to balance just budget constraints and what can we do, because this project, like every project we do, is a slippery slope of we could have an overlook, we could have restoration. We kind of have to be really mindful of just budget constraints, but to do the right thing as well. So, but yes, we haven't really gotten into that yet.
Yeah, well, I would just, to echo some of Susan's concerns, I would think, asphalt in a 25 would definitely require some sort of mitigation,
Yeah.
In terms of plantings or what have you.
Thanks, David. I see David White. Did you put your hand up again? You did?
I was going to speak about maintenance requirements. Maintenance is
Okay.
a consideration for all this.
Absolutely. Brian? Oh, you're on mute, Brian.
Yeah, it seems like a good track this conversation is. Okay, we have some concerns about the lack of habitat enhancements here. We have some detriments to the habitat. So where's the balance, right? And that seeing something concrete would make me personally feel better that this was a smart project. I don't know if it could be on the other side of the bank or it could be in a specific location where we did some genuine habitat enhancements. I think that would be a great compromise. I hear there's advocates for strollers, there's advocates for bikes, there's advocates for walker. Who is the advocate for the habitat? And I think that's the voices that you're hearing right now, because we want to have that as part of the equation.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
I also had that. So personally, because we're just having a working session and we're talking about all the issues that might come up, I'd like to see an asphalt path outside of the 25. That's kind of like a hard fast with mitigation, but outside of the 25. I'd also like to see the impact broken up as to if you're adding impervious surface, was that already one of those paths, those stone dust paths? Because I'm more inclined to allow a path, even an asphalt path, where there's one already, where I know it's very compacted, it's not infiltrating, those paths are not infiltrating. I know that. So I'm more inclined to be okay with allowing an asphalt path where there was one already, rather than a new one. Unless that new one is at least outside the 25. This is just my point of view. I do agree with taking out the that asphalt. So I do see that you have the impervious impacts, but I guess what I'm saying is within the 25, how much of that 4,600 square feet was there already?
Yes, and we can calc that.
Okay.
I was trying to anticipate what might come up.
No, that's okay. That's why we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
So that's important to me to
Yes.
know what's existing.
Totally.
In terms of that gravel path, which we know is not impervious. And I would like to see some consideration, as we've heard, for habitat enhancement. To me, that's not just planting, that's also water quality. And those outfalls are a problem. And they're not that expensive to fix. We did the Mystic Riverfront restoration, that little restoration area, and that was probably more than what you need to just fix an outfall, because of course we put a swale in there and et cetera. That was like $50,000 or less. I mean, it wasn't a huge amount of money. And so to fix these other 3 or 4 outfalls that actually belong to Arlington, in that, I think most of them are in that area, at least 3 of them. I'd like that to be consideration for improving water quality, and it'll improve flooding problems, because of the overland flow. So I'd like to see that as well.
So are you, are they all owned by Arlington in this stretch, or I just hadn't
No.
really?
I can have David Morgan, I can show him where those files are. And I can have him send them to you. So DCR owns many of them, and they've already fixed them.
I thought I saw some on the other side of Route 60, right?
There's some on the other side too.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of them, and most of them are DCRs, but there's a handful that are Arlingtons. One of them obviously was the one we already improved, which was at the restoration area. And then there's 3 others, which DCR figured out were Arlingtons when they were proposing to fix them all, and said, oh, we don't have to fix these because they're not ours. And there's no rhyme or reason why some of them belong to the town. So anyway, I can get you that information through David.
Okay.
And then DCR was also going to do some more restoration as mitigation for fixing these outfalls, because they had to remove some trees. But I think that's on the other side of that rotary at High Street. I think it was on the other side of the rotary, so it wouldn't impact what you're doing. But there should be some coordination, because I would hate to see DCR restoring and adding trees where you're going to move them or have to move them because you didn't know they were going to be added there.
So when was that work done and who was doing it?
DCR.
Well, I guess I mean within DCR.
Within DCR.
Yeah.
I can find that out too. David can pull up the permit for you and get all the information.
Okay.
It's not a closed project. They didn't get a certificate of compliance yet because they didn't finish all the planting. but they did do the outfalls.
Okay.
But I will get you that
I
information.
have a
Some of
feeling
them
that's
are
our
on one side.
stormwater folks, but I
They
want to,
might be, yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them are on the side you're working on that side of High Street, and some of them are on the other side.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I see Mike has his hand up, and then I'm going to go to open it for public comment just for very quick, because we're at 8 o'clock and I didn't want this to last too long.
Yeah,
But
Yeah. So
thanks. I just wanted to get a sense of what the next steps are and what the overall timing of this project is, just so we have some sense of that, if you have that idea yet.
Yep. And that was what I was going to mention, is that we do have a public meeting planned as part of this. We wanted to have this conversation first, just to identify what we should be looking out for and sharpen our pencils on. Originally, we were thinking this spring for a public meeting and then moving into design later this year, but I need to circle back with the team and kind of see where we're at. And then capital funding on when this would be built is still something that would be in the works. We're looking at our 5-year capital plan in like a couple months. So that's when we look out and see how we fit it into our budget.
So we're talking a couple of years anyway.
Yeah, probably.
thank you. I'm going to open this up for public comment. I thought I saw Susan Stamp's hand up, but now it's down. So I don't know if you wanted to make a comment, Susan. And please introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, thank you. Susan Stamps, Grafton Street in East Arlington. I'm over there all the time. I got here a little late, so I didn't hear what your plan was to do with the existing sidewalk from the Route 60 Rotary up to the intersection with Mystic Street. Were you planning on, I think maybe you were planning on widening that, basically widening
So that
it?
stretch was in the feasibility study that was done in 2022. And that's being broken out as a separate project from this. Because in order to widen that, we have to change the road cross section. So it's just more complex.
Oh, I see.
Whereas
Okay,
this one is
because-
all within the existing parkland. So it's Route 60 down to Alewife Brook Greenway.
Oh, okay. Well, then.
So it's all part of a bigger vision, but
Yeah.
we're segmenting out the implementation pieces.
Oh, I see, because I would hope to see some trees or some kind of screening between the pathway of the sidewalk, whatever you want to call it, up to the in that section between the Rotary and Mystic Street, because it's a really truly terrible place to walk. So
I know, and it's so beautiful there along the lakes. It's real
it's
mist.
beautiful, but
Yeah.
right beside the cars is pretty bad. Okay, thank you. Sounds good. But I do agree with Brian, his concern about habitat, and Susan.
Thank you, Susan. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to make a comment? You can use the raise hand function in the reaction button at the bottom of your screen, or just wave if you're. I don't see anybody. Do you see anybody, David? No? Okay. So I'm going to close public comment section. And at this point, I think we've given you a lot of good ideas, and you've helped us understand the project. So I really appreciate you putting a lot of time and effort into explaining it to us. We look forward to seeing the next steps. And please, of course, David Morgan is involved in this, and I'll get him the information that you requested on the outfalls.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time. I know this isn't a standard course of practice, so we
But for
appreciate
these
it.
types of projects
Yeah.
that are so large and complex, and they involve, different organizations and communities and regulatory agencies, I appreciate that you requested a working session. I think it's helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great.
Have a good evening.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Susan,
Yeah.
Susan, if I may make a quick plug.
Sure.
The Mystic River Watershed Association has also just recently kicked off a shoreline revitalization plan process for the West Medford shoreline of the Mystic River, and also the few peninsulas that are along the eastern shoreline of the Mystic Lakes. We have our first community meeting focusing more specifically on the West Medford segment on Wednesday, March 5th. And so I just wanted to go plug for this interested audience here tonight would love to see you there, and a lot of thoughts and recommendations shared here tonight would be greatly appreciated as well. So I will put a link to that Zoom registration here in the chat, if that's okay. And
Great,
thank
sure.
you for letting me do my plug.
Sure. Thanks, Carl. No, that's very interesting. I didn't know of that initiative. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have, I'm going to use my discretion and skip to the hearings because it's 8 o'clock and I don't want to belabor this, make this too long, and then we'll go back to some discussion items as we have time. I'm going to open the hearing for the request for determination of applicability at 69 Henderson Street. The Arlington Conservation Commission is holding this public hearing to consider a request for determination of applicability under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Arlington Bylaw for Wetlands Protection for alteration to the existing front porch and steps at 69 Henderson Street in Arlington within the outer 200 riverfront area to Alewife Brook. And I understand, excuse me, that we have the architect here for the applicant who's going to present. Is that correct?
Yes, hi.
Oh, thank you. If you can introduce
Hi.
yourself. Thank you, Catherine.
I am Catherine McPhail, and I'm the architect helping on this project. And do you want me to share my screen so you can?
That would be helpful. Thank you.
All right. There we go. All right, so this is a lot simpler than the last project we were just hearing about. So they have an existing front porch they would like to enclose, and in doing so, they are going to need to build a new landing here. So that's about 3.5 by 4 feet or so. Let me say 3.5 by 4 feet, 13.5 square feet of this landing, which is actually going to be taking out that amount of pavers that are there. So that is I think the extent of the change that is proposed. And it's within your jurisdiction, obviously, so that's why I can show
Right.
you.
Could you show us that I know in the materials you submitted, there was a figure all the way at the end that showed the jurisdictional areas. It's helpful for the commission to see. Do you have that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you mean the survey?
Yeah, the survey, the stamp survey at that, right. There we go. I don't know if you can make that
Am I
bigger,
showing the
but
survey right now? Oh, right. Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened there. Okay. I can make this bigger. So this is where the porch is. I mean, and this is Alewife Brook Park back here. So it's within the 200-foot riverfront area.
but just slightly down there. And you're proposing not to add any impervious surface because you're removing pavers? Is that?
Yeah, so there's a paved walk right now that goes from the steps right now or right here, and they're being pushed out about 3 feet toward the sidewalk. So I have to go to the zoning board of appeals for that. But this area underneath the landing and underneath the stairs, I guess is considered permeable. Is that right? Because of the possibility of water getting between the
pavers.
Right. Well, those pavers will be removed where
Okay.
it's being extended out.
Okay. And the porch itself is, I think it's enclosed already. It has a roof.
It has a roof right now,
Proposing to
yes.
enclose it. So
Yeah.
the porch itself right now is considered impervious. I just want to make that clear to the commission. Okay.
Yes.
Are there questions or comments from commissioners about this work? Dave Kaplan?
Yeah, I had a question. What's the proposed chimney there on the backside? Is that part of this project or?
It is not part of the project. it is, I tried to get the surveyor to take that off, but it's not really a chimney. It's actually a firebox that's cantilevering off of the house in the back. That is a simultaneous project going on right now, but it's already being built, but it's not touching the ground. I talked to David Morgan about that. It's not, it actually shouldn't be on this survey.
Okay. No, well, it seems like a de minimis change to what's existing, so I don't have any more questions.
Thank you, Dave. Any other questions from commissioners? If not, would a commissioner like to make a motion about this RDA?
I could try to fumble through it. I
Good
always
deal.
get I always get
Yeah, it's
I
good,
always get
Dave.
confused with the
I know, I
so
get confused too.
so it is in jurisdictional resource area in the 200-foot, but
Yep.
it is not subject to, well, it is subject to the Wetlands Protection Act, but it's doesn't qualify for a notice of intent. So I recommend issuing a negative determination of applicability.
Thank you.
Does that
That sounds good to
does
me.
that work?
Well,
Yeah.
nice job.
Yeah.
Second.
Brian seconds. Is any more discussion needed? Sometimes we do put conditions on RDAs, but this seems so de minimis that we may not need to do that. I'll entertain any discussion from the commission, and if no discussion, then we'll vote. I don't see any hands up, so then we're going to vote on a negative determination, which means it's within jurisdictional area and NOI is not required. So David White,
Yes.
Mike Gilderscane,
Yes.
Dave Kaplan,
Yes.
Brian McBride,
Yes.
and Susan Chapnick says yes. So that was quick, Catherine. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
take care. Okay, so, oh, I forgot to open for public comment. That was
Oh.
terrible of me. Actually, can I just see if there's anybody in the public who was going to make a comment for this? If so, I will open the hearing again.
Sure.
I don't see anybody, so I think we're safe. Okay. I don't have Nathaniel here to tell me what I'm forgetting to do. Okay, we're going to go on to open the hearing for the notice of intent for 995 Massachusetts Avenue. This is a hearing to consider the notice of intent under the Wetlands Protection Act, that's the state Wetlands Protection Act, and the Arlington bylaw for wetlands protection for parking lot reconstruction at 995 Massachusetts Avenue, which is in the buffer zone, an adjacent upland resource area that's 100 feet, and riverfront area to Mill Brook, as well as the buffer zone and adjacent upland resource area to a bordering vegetated wetland. And I understand that we have Hancock Associates here. Do we?
Yes, good evening. My name is
Oh,
David.
Tony. Okay,
Yes, Tony. Tony Donato from Hancock Associates.
thank you, Tony.
Thank you, and for your time. If I could share my screen here, I have the plan pulled up.
Sure.
Thank you. Well, here's an aerial view of the site. I'm sure you're familiar with. It's right near the Arlington Fire Station. There's two buildings here. I believe there's about I'm not exactly sure the number of units offhand. I know there's 101 parking spaces required, and that's what we're providing with this layout. Now, these buildings here, there's under this larger building, there's parking underneath the building, and then there's some surface parking that is accessed from Brattle Street. Here's the plan that we prepared, and I also have I have a plan, existing conditions plan, just to give you an idea of what's going on here. So Brattle Street here, and right now, this is parking here, and it's not striped. It's kind of at its end of its service life. There's a lot of alligator cracking and potholes, and There's an entrance back here. There's
So
the senior
Tony, are
center-
you showing another screen? Because we're seeing the original screen where it's just the Google view.
Oh, okay. Let me
Yeah, I think
maybe
it didn't transfer to another screen.
I might be sharing just a window by accident, but
Okay.
let me try that. Is that better?
Yes, I think that's what you
Okay,
meant.
thank
If you
you.
could make it a little bigger, that would be great. But yeah,
I'll try.
okay.
Let's see. So again, this shaded area is the existing parking lot. The yellow line here is the edge of the north end of the property line, which extends over the Mill Brook, which is shown here in blue. And access is from Brattle Street. And I have some photos here of the site just to give you an idea of, the condition of the pavement. Here's the access to the garage. Here's the photos of the existing ADA parking that doesn't meet MAAB requirements. Another shot of the parking lot. And the Millbrook is on the left, the alligator cracking. Another shot of the edge of the parking lot between the parking lot and the brook. And here's a picture of the brook itself. So just to talk about this plan here. So what we're proposing to do is reconstruct the parking lot, just repave it and then restripe it to meet zoning requirements. And then at this corner here, we're going to be providing 5 ADA parking spaces and an accessible route to the garage entrance here. Currently, the stormwater off the site kind of sheet flows towards the Mill Brook. There's no stormwater management controls. What we're proposing to do as a mitigation measures, we're only providing what we need for parking, and the 25-foot access aisle is required, by zoning and just traffic engineering requirements. These shaded areas here are paved areas currently that will be removed, and then we will replace with loam and seed. So they would be vegetated, and some berm provided around these landscaped areas. So overall, there's going to be a 2,800 square foot reduction in the amount of impervious for the parking lot. Excuse me. Now, we will provide erosion control at the edge of the parking lot. There's an operation and maintenance plan that's included within the stormwater report. There's a erosion and sedimentation plan provided during construction, and some construction details, general notes. As I understand, there's a couple issues right now with the project, and specifically Mr. Morgan advised me to check with the fire department just to confirm that they are satisfied with the access to the site. I did provide Deputy Melly with a plan earlier in this week. I think he's been out of the office a couple days. I sent him this fire truck turn template. I'm waiting to hear back from him. It's kind of mimicking existing conditions. It's not, we're kind of limited on space and what we can provide. We can't provide a turnaround at the end, but it does access the back of the building without crossing over any parking spaces. And I am aware that there's an enforcement order for some work that was done on our parcel by an abutting property. I believe it's this LaRusso Castelluccio. There was some encroachment over here that the condominium association is working with them to try to get that resolved. And as I understand that if there was a vote or some kind of approval for this, that there would be conditioned that work be done first, and that's fine if we get to that point. So given that presentation, I just open up to the commission if they have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Tony. I have a few, but I'll open it up to commissioners first for questions. Dave Kaplan.
Yeah, thanks for that presentation. I guess my first question is, how is the work going to be conducted for the resurfacing of the driveway? Or is this just sort of a mill and repave, or are you doing full depth excavation? What's the extent, I guess, of the
I did
construct?
talk to, they did send us out for pricing to a paving contractor, and I believe he's just going to kind of pulverize in place and and then maybe they'll skim off a couple inches or whatnot, and then just pave over it.
Okay, so there will be sort of a base course left that you're working with, because when I look at this project, it's listed as redevelopment, and um, you're improving existing conditions by removing existing impervious surface, but I don't see any analysis or anything consistent with the Stormwater Handbook. What is it, Chapter 3, Volume 2, on any kind of analysis to meet those stormwater standards 2 through 6 to the maximum extent practicable. So I just wanted to know what sort of analysis that you did that we could review, that shows the opportunities and the constraints to meet those stormwater standards.
Let me pull up the I believe I have the checklist here. Well, I think the intent was that there wasn't a point source discharge there now. We're not creating a new point source discharge. We're reducing the amount of stormwater runoff from the site through the reduction of pavement, which will reduce the volume and the rate of stormwater. So here we go.
Right, yeah, but I'm, specifically to what did you do in terms of, evaluating recharge opportunities? What did you do in terms of evaluating 80% TSS removal opportunities? And what are the opportunities and the constraints to meeting those to the maximum extent practicable?
Well, the opportunity would be we would have to install a closed drainage system on the site and provide some recharge. Have to do a test pit. I would assume that the water table is relatively high, given with the brook, the stream next door, and then we'd have to create a closed network pipe system within the parking lot, and then find a spot and then discharge it out to the brook. So I mean, I guess that would be for full compliance, but I just didn't think it would be warranted, given that it's just a repaving project, and the intent is to meet MAAB requirements for parking, provide striping, and then just to kind of upgrade the parking lot, just to get rid of the potholes and the cracking of the pavement. So,
Right.
I mean, I guess that would be the extent, is to provide a full drainage system, direct at some low point on site, add some catch basins, and then, some infiltration or mechanical separator. And then we'd have to create a point source discharge out to the Millbrook.
Okay.
I see other hands up too, but did you have a follow-on question, Dave? I thought that was a good question.
Yeah, no, I did. I guess, what is the plan for those areas that you're removing the impervious surface from? Can you just go over those real quick, please?
Yeah, so we were going to create a berm, Cape Cod berm around these areas, and then we were showing with 6-inch loam and seed. I mean, if you guys prefer some plantings there, we could possibly add some trees or something to the site, or bushes.
Right. And I guess, yeah, I have a lot of questions. I'm sorry. What's the condition? I guess, like right now, everything just sheet flows off. It looked like some areas are curbed and some areas aren't. What is the condition, I guess, of the buffer that receives that runoff? I mean, is there any noticeable kind of erosion and scouring? Are there any points of concentration that you're noticing that could be, potentially sort of regraded or planted in a way that would reduce the impacts to the resource area? I guess I'm not as familiar with the site to understand, I guess, all the, you're redoing the parking lot, and you could put, how are you making this decisions, like what gets curbed and what doesn't? Where are you going to release the stormwater? And, how are you making sure that there isn't going to be any concentration and gullying and erosion from the work that you're planning to do?
Yeah, I had walked the site. I didn't really notice anything. Maybe some around here. There was some I mean, it was mostly heavily vegetated along, I guess this would be the west end of the parking lot. Maybe along here, there was some spots that could use some vegetation. I was actually thinking about this myself, and I was thinking what we could propose is maybe a jute netting along the edge for a specific edge, or some kind of geotextile, just to make sure that the plantings have sufficient time to germinate and minimize any chances of erosion. But other than that, I think what I did was, in order not to really change any of the drainage flows, I just kind of were showing the grading just to match existing.
Okay. Okay.
David, you done? I have a lot of questions too, but I see a
Yeah.
lot of hands up, so let's keep it moving for now, and we can come back to you
Thank
if
you.
you need. David Morgan, and then I'm going to go to David White and Brian McBride.
Sure. So the points Dave Kaplan made, I think, are valid, good ones. Stormwater analysis makes sense to me in this context, and I may be wrong, but I don't think you can do a point source discharge to a body of water like that under the Clean Water Act. So you'd have to tie in probably to a town system, which is additionally complicated, or at least into an existing outfall. There may or may not be an existing outfall on site, but setting that aside, I wanted to raise just to point out to Tony, there's a recent town bylaw that pertains to parking lot reconstruction and the amount of shade that needs to be installed. So I think that we need to determine whether or not that bylaw is applicable in this situation, and then have the plans reflect the forms of mitigation, basically, for shade that need to be incorporated into the plan when we get a resubmission for supplemental materials. So that's just occurred to me tonight, that this project likely does qualify, and we need to work that out with, I don't know, maybe inspectional services or legal, since it's a new-ish bylaw. Then they would make some kind of determination about the applicability. Anyway, I wanted to flag that for later because it is something that likely has an effect on mitigation plantings, for
Thank you.
trees providing shade.
Thanks, David. I wasn't aware of that either. David White?
Yes, I'm also concerned about runoff and drainage issues as well. I think it's a difficult spot here. I'm wondering also maybe some rain gardens or swales might be possibilities in terms of managing the runoff from the parking lot. And I believe there is an outlet at the far eastern end of the parking lot, off the building, I think. That's my comments for now.
Thank you, David. Brian?
Yeah, I was just going to ask the same question David did. And so just to add that this is a big heat island. Obviously, with global warming, it's going to become more of a problem. So it would be great if the applicant would consider trees along the perimeter to give shade, even if it turns out this is not required under the new bylaw. which I'll paste in the chat. But I think it would be a good mitigation in either event. Thanks.
Thank you. Mike, Gildes-Game?
Yes, I'm somewhat familiar with this site and it is pretty flat. And my observation is that the runoff goes into those vegetated areas between the parking lot and then the stream. My only question is that that works fine, perhaps as to slow off the runoff. But during the winter, when those plants are not in place, or certainly not as much of them, I'm wondering if there's any concern about winter flow versus summer runoff, because it's pretty darn flat. So I don't think there's any chance of gullying or major erosion, but just wondering about the difference between summer and winter flows.
Well, Vic, I haven't, when I went out there and took these photos, it was in August, and as you're aware, it was pretty dry that time of year. And you know, with the snow now, I haven't been out there, but I think your point of the site being kind of flat and you know, it's not really like running along. There's really no. Well, the curb's kind of broken along here. I guess there are some spots with berm, but it's not really like channelizing and then sheet flowing like at a point. It's kind of just kind of like an even sheet flow off the pavement for the most part. And there's these large trees that are around here that kind of hold the soil together. So I don't think it's an issue. We're not removing any of these trees that are along here. And again, if we plant more trees, and then I guess my other suggestion would be is that if maybe along this edge, if we provide a jute netting or some kind of geotextile underneath just to kind of stabilize that soil until the vegetation gets rooted, or just to help it come along.
Did you have a follow-up question, Mike, or was that it? I'll go back to.
That was it for the moment.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if David Morgan or David White raised their hand first.
Mine's short.
Okay, go ahead, David.
Question about snow storage. Where does the snow get stored in the wintertime?
Yeah, what do you do with snow plowing right now, Tony? Do you know?
I do not know what they do. I'd have to ask the that's a good question. I can ask is the property manager on that. I assume that maybe they pick a corner, or if there's if it gets out of hand, that they would truck it off site.
Right, because of course it can't get stockpiled into the, close to the brook. That's not allowed. Okay, thank you. David Morgan?
So I was just looking for, actually, Tony, if you don't mind, I'm going to share screen to show our map here. There we go. This blue hatched area is the bordering vegetated wetland in our GIS. And I remember this coming up when we had a conversation about the redevelopment of 1021 and 1027 Mass Ave right here, because they were performing some mitigation in the back, and we were looking at the jurisdictional areas, the distance from the river and so forth. Does anyone recall whether that was mapped as part of the 1021 project? I just pulled their plans and didn't see it indicated there, but I remember a discussion about it at any rate. Anybody remember details?
I do remember that they were revegetating, enhancing, I'll say enhancing, not revegetating, enhancing the vegetation habitat in that area as part of their mitigation. And
Yes.
they had gotten approval or some kind of understanding with 995 to be able to do that.
Yes, and as I remember, that might be a little bit farther up, like
Okay,
this sort of area where my cursor is. I think there might be, anyway, at some point, someone indicated that there is a bordering vegetated wetland at the edge of the parking lot at the bend in the river immediately behind 66R Dudley Street. And so I think that's worth checking out. Even just a cursory site assessment to be like, is there something worth delineating here? Any indication of BVW there? So I know we had that conversation about the offsite mitigation, and I can try and pull those plans while we're talking, but
okay, but I don't think we have had a delineation here, a formal delineation, have we?
no.
No, I don't think so, and maybe we need that.
Yeah, this is probably pulling from like mass DEP data or something historical, but since it's there, I think it's, noteworthy.
Right. Thank you. David Morgan, I'd also like you to just summarize the enforcement order that's, pending as well, and how that impact our approach to this project.
Sure. The property, and actually, Tony, you might have more info on this than I do, but we were told that I believe it's 14 Dudley Court here rented the property in sort of this corner of the Millbrook Condo Association's lot. And that was transformed from treed area into parking lot. I'm second guessing myself on the address right now, but we did have a conversation with the building manager about that, and that being an upcoming enforcement issue to resolve. We were waiting for the issue at 66R Dudley to get resolved before embarking on one farther down Dudley Street. So held off, but they're aware that it's non-compliant, and it's germane to this conversation because, as Tony indicated earlier, it's something that the commission wants to see wrapped up, that we deal with these enforcement matters before issuing and or make construction contingent upon that as a condition, whatever the commission decides in those terms. But yeah, that's the next move here for this property. I think once we get through the first Dudley Street enforcement matter, onto the next one, and this reconstruction of the parking lot will either happen concurrent with that or following.
I will say that it's been this commission's decisions in the past that we don't permit a project on a property that has an enforcement order. I'm not saying the commission won't consider that and maybe make it a condition, but this has just been our precedent. Our precedent is you close out the enforcement order and then we can move on with the notice of intent. Given that I've written a lot of things that we have concerns about this NOI, you might have time to the property owner might have time to close out the other enforcement orders before this NOI gets all the supplemental materials together. I think just in summary, the biggest issue is that it's redevelopment in riverfront area. And redevelopment in riverfront area must meet the stormwater standards to the extent practicable, as Brian brought up. You can't get around that. That's a requirement under the State Wetland Protection Act, as well as under our local bylaw. So that needs to be looked at. What is the stormwater management, and is it meeting the redevelopment standards to the extent practicable out of the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook? So that's one big issue that needs to be addressed. Another one is we talked about the town bylaw about planting trees for parking lots. I think that would dovetail with what several commissioners said about more robust vegetation in those areas where you're removing hard surface, which is great that you're removing it. But we would like to see more robust habitat that might include trees and shrubs as well as ground cover. That's often what we request in riverfront because we need to see an improvement in the riverfront area for any work that alters that area. And then we've talked about a delineation. We believe there might be bordering vegetated wetland in that area or near where you're working. We need to understand what our wetland jurisdiction is. So you're going to need to get a wetland guy out there or woman to delineate and see if there is really bordering vegetated wetland in that area, as David Morgan pointed out.
Can I add a little bit
Yeah,
of detail there,
sure.
Susan?
Sure.
I pulled the plans for the 1021 project, and my memory was right that the mitigation area was where my cursor was showing, and the BVW is farther to the north, sort of where the parking lot makes a 90-degree angle turning south. So for context, that should help. I mention it really to say we don't have a delineation. They did, measure the distance from their mitigation area to the site, but this being just north of there, it was out of their scope and they didn't go measure it.
They didn't delineate it. Okay, well, that's good to know. I will say for the stormwater management, meeting the stormwater management standards, that the Massachusetts DEP says that you should perform test pits in April or May, which is coming up soon enough. So you do have an opportunity to put test pits in to see where the estimated seasonal high groundwater is. I'd encourage you, if you're going to continue with this NOI, to do that as part of the process, because we're going to ask for that information as part of meeting the standards. And then I don't know if there was anything else from the commission, but I'd like to open it up to public comment, so I don't forget to do that. So I'm opening this up for public comment. Anybody from the public, if you do have a comment, you can use the reaction button to raise your hand, or just raise your hand, and I'll see you. I see Susan Stamps.
Thank you. Susan Stamps, East Arlington. I also wanted to emphasize the new part of the zoning bylaw, which requires trees in shaded parking lots. It's not, there was a question as to when would it apply? Obviously, it would apply to new parking lots. If a parking lot was just being repaved, that's it. It wouldn't apply. It seemed like almost anything in between it would apply. And I noticed that in the materials that it says, actually, I just put that, yeah, it says, the first sentence in the project narrative says, the Millbrook condominium proposes replacing the existing parking lot. So, I do think this is going to be a candidate, and I think this will be the first project under that new parking lot bylaw. And I'm very excited about it as being one of the co-authors of that. And I would hope that the developer would be very proud to have the first project in town, and it will really pave the way for a whole new era of development in Arlington. So I just wanted to thank them for that.
Pave the way, Susan, really?
Yes, yeah,
That was a really
It
good
was
turn of phrase there.
really not intended.
That was
Anyway,
good. Thank you. Any additional comments from the public? I don't see any. Okay, I will close the public comment period. Uh, Sydney Johnson, did you?
Yes, I'm
Yes,
sorry if I can't un, undo everything, but I can just get a quick message in.
Could you please state your name and your address for the
Yes,
record?
Sydney Johnson, and my relevant address for the record is 1010 Waltham Street. Sorry, that's my, it's another residence, but this is at 990 Massachusetts Avenue. So
Thank
it's
you.
right in the area. And I merely did not in the discussion, they were accompanied by lovely photographs made on a sunny day and a nice situation. And I thought that addressing the runoff and so forth might also be, it might be relevant to the people wrestling with it. If somebody just strode out there and took some equivalent photographs in the area right now, where we've got the winter sleet and ice and everything in there, where the snow is piled up, because the climate change is going to be, of course, more and more wide swings, not merely an average. And I just want to be sure that the way they finally work it all out is that it covers how bad it could possibly be with this impact. It's merely a concern. I don't think it's going to ruin the whole operation. Sorry for the long comment.
No, thank you very much, Sydney. And actually, I appreciate your comment, especially since I forgot to mention, and I usually do remember to mention in notices of intent, that the local bylaw in Arlington and our implementing wetland regulations require that projects meet certain standards for climate change resilience, including flood control, heat, mitigation of heat, etc. It's in our regulations, and those sections need to be met. And the project, there needs to be a project narrative about how they're met. So that's another thing to add to the supplemental materials that'll be required for this NOI. Okay, so now if I don't see anybody else, I am going to close public comment. Okay, and go back to the commission. Are there any further comments from commissioners? And if not, I think Tony will need to entertain a motion with your approval to continue this because there are several outstanding issues as we discussed.
Certainly, yeah. I guess, would you want to do it on a month from now? Because I don't think I would be able to.
Right, so if you're going to resubmit materials to meet the stormwater standards, you are going to need test pit data.
Okay.
I guess you could do it in March. The DP suggests April or May, but maybe, mid-March or end of March might be appropriate, depending upon the rainfall. That's up to you. So I don't know if you want to set a continuation before you can get all the information you need. But that's up to you. You're the applicant, so you can choose, and we could continue it again if you can't meet that date.
Yeah, I would need to talk to the property owner to see, discuss this with them. So you are.
So what are the meetings,
why would
David
you-
Morgan, in
March 20th, I think is.
March 20th, and then what's the next one in April?
Bear with me, I need to get the calendar out.
Okay,
It would be the 3rd.
okay.
And I'm just checking our schedule to confirm that. Yeah, so the submission deadline for the April 3rd meeting would be the 26th of March. The submission deadline for the one prior, the meeting on the 20th of March, would be the 12th of that month.
Yeah, so why don't we do it, I guess the earliest would be the 3rd, and then if something happens, I can touch base with you, David.
Sounds good. Yep.
So, okay, so I need a motion from a commissioner to continue this hearing to April 3rd.
So moved.
That was Mike. Second?
I'll
I'll
second it.
second.
Oops, who got that?
I'll give it to David White.
Okay,
Okay.
David White.
Get around here.
All right. Any further discussion? I don't see. I will take a roll call vote to continue this hearing to April 3rd. So Dave Kaplan,
Yes.
Brian McBride,
Yes.
David White,
Yes.
Mike Gilderstain,
Yes.
and Susan Chapnick says yes. So Tony, you can work with David Morgan if you need any further assistance in understanding what we requested. And David, he needs to get that material to the commission by what date again?
6th.
For the April 3rd meeting,
Yep, 26th of March.
the 26th of March? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
Thank you for your
Yep,
time.
thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Okay. So we're a little before 9. We're gonna try to close within 10-15 minutes. How about that? So I'm gonna go back to the discussion groups. Water Bodies Working Group, quick update from David White.
Everything's frozen.
Everything's frozen. That's a good update. No ice fishing?
So we're working on the report, and also the presentation to the Finance Committee, probably early March.
Early March, okay, thank you. CPA Committee Liaison,
No news.
Ryan, no news. Tree Committee, Sarah?
Yes, the tree committee had a meeting on February 12th. And the biggest item, takeaway from that meeting was that the funding for the Cool Corners grant that would provide, 200 trees to East Arlington, we're kind of waiting for the federal government to know whether the grant is on hold or not. And that's it.
Unfortunate. Unfortunately, I think we're going to hear a lot of that.
Yeah.
I was worried about the Mystic to Minuteman Bikeway, which also has federal funds, and whether that's going to actually go.
Yeah.
I
Next.
Guess we'll all see.
The Cool Corridors grant, I have been assured, is in hand.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
So that money just needs to get from the state to the town, and I have the paperwork to do that. I was gonna have a conversation with them this afternoon, but ran out of time, so we've pushed it to early next week.
Oh, that's good news, though.
That's really
Thank
good.
you.
That's
Awesome.
great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And there's no update on Sims. We are going to have a full discussion about the Sims conservation restriction. What meeting is that, David Morgan? Was that the 6th or the 20th? I forgot.
Oh, geez, I'm forgetting too.
All right, well, we'll find it on the agenda, but it's in March. And that's going to be led by Nathaniel Stevens when he gets back. Any other business from commissioners? No? Okay.
No.
All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, David. Second?
Second.
All right, Mike. And just wave. Everybody agree?
Okay, we'll agree. We'll agree.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Next
Good
time.
night.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Aye.